My name is Claire Weston. I'm 29. I teach piano. For most of my life, I thought the worst thing my family could do was treat me like background noise. Then, 4 weeks ago, my parents sold my grandmother Evelyn Harper's antique Steinway. It was the piano she promised would be mine. They used the entire $95,000 to buy my younger sister, Brooke, a brand new Mercedes. They did it quietly and confidently. They acted like it wasn't theft, just handling things. They assumed hospice meant Evelyn would never find out. They also assumed I'd stay silent like I always had. It started on a Tuesday afternoon, right after my last student left. My dad, Mark, called with zero warmth. He said, "They're moving your grandmother to hospice. Family meeting at the hospital in an hour." I drove over with my stomach in knots. In the waiting room, my parents were already there. Dad stood with his arms crossed, like this was an inconvenience. Mom, Linda, clutched her designer purse like a shield. Brooke sat scrolling on her phone, bored. Nobody asked how I was. Nobody asked if I'd seen Evelyn yet. The meeting wasn't about feelings, it was about logistics. "We need to divide responsibilities," Dad said. He decided someone had to visit Evelyn daily. He said he and Mom were busy. He said Brooke was in a critical phase with her boyfriend Ethan and his wealthy family. So the job fell on me. Dad said my schedule was flexible, like teaching music to kids doesn't count as real work. I agreed because I wanted to be with Evelyn anyway. But as I walked toward the hospice wing, I heard Mom mutter to Brooke, "At least she's useful for something." I kept walking. Turning around never changed anything in that family. Evelyn's room smelled like lavender and old books. She refused to let death smell like antiseptic. She was physically weak, but mentally sharp. Every day after teaching, I showed up. I brought tea, I sat with her, I listened to her stories. My parents came twice and stayed less than 20 minutes each time. Brooke came once. She took a picture for memories. She kissed Evelyn's forehead like it was a performance. Then she left for dinner plans. One evening, Evelyn squeezed my hand. She said it clearly, like she needed it to land. "The Steinway is yours. I told your parents last month in front of everyone. That piano belongs to you. I promised I'd take care of it. I meant it." Still, I felt gratitude mixed with dread. I'd seen my parents' faces tighten any time Evelyn talked about leaving something to me. 2 weeks later, Evelyn asked me to go to her house. She wanted a box of old photos from her study, concert programs, performance pictures. I drove over after work on a rainy Thursday. I used my key. The silence inside hit me first. It was the kind of silence that feels wrong. I walked into the living room and stopped so hard I forgot to breathe. The corner where the Steinway had sat for decades was empty, not moved, not covered, gone. Only a pale rectangle in the carpet remained, like a ghost outline. My hands started shaking. I called my mom. "Where's Grandma's piano?" I asked. After a short pause, she answered in a casual, dismissive tone. "Your father handled it," like she was telling me he took out the trash. "Handled it how?" I said. "Where is it?" She sighed like I was being dramatic. "Adult matters, Claire. You don't need to worry about it." I tried again. "I'm standing in her living room. It's gone. Where is it?" She hung up on me. I stood there staring at that empty corner while rain tapped the windows. Something inside me went cold and clear. In that moment, I understood what they thought hospice meant. Permission. And I realized they weren't just stealing a piano, they were erasing Evelyn's voice while she was still alive. They were betting everything on the idea that I'd be too soft to stop them. I picked up the photo box because Evelyn asked for it. Then I left that house knowing the peace I'd been protecting was never real. If I stayed quiet this time, I'd be complicit. I was terrified of what my mother would say. I was terrified of what my father would do. I was terrified of the blame they would throw at me. But I also knew I couldn't unsee the empty space, and I couldn't pretend I didn't know who created it. I didn't even drive straight back to hospice after I found that empty corner. I sat in my car outside Evelyn's house with the photo box on the passenger seat, staring at the windows and feeling my heartbeat in my throat. My mom's "adult matters" wasn't just dismissive, it was a warning. We did this and you don't get a say. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway that evening, the anger had hardened into something colder, something steadier. like I needed to hear the truth from their mouths just to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. My dad opened the door with a scotch in his hand and an irritated expression like I'd interrupted his night. When I said, "Where's Grandma's piano?" he didn't even pretend. He took a sip and said, flatly, "Sold. 95,000. Good price." For a second, the hallway seemed to tilt, because that piano wasn't furniture. It was the closest thing to comfort I ever had in that family. Then Brooke appeared behind him, grinning, swinging a set of keys like a trophy. New keys for a new car. I still remember the exact sound those keys made, because it felt like they were jingling right over Evelyn's heartbeat. "You bought her a Mercedes with Grandma's piano money?" I asked. My dad shrugged like it was weather and said Brooke needed to make the right impression because Ethan Caldwell's parents were particular about appearances. My mom stepped in with her arms crossed and her tight smile and told me it was about Brooke's future, as if that one word could justify anything. Brooke didn't even try to look sorry. She told me not to be jealous and said it wasn't a good look. When I said the piano had been promised to me, my mom snapped that I teach children, don't perform, and don't have the space, like my life was a small, embarrassing hobby that shouldn't stand in the way of their plans. I asked the only question that mattered. Does Grandma know? The silence that followed was so loud it answered before they did. My mom's eyes went hard, and she said Evelyn was dying and didn't need stress. When I said, "You mean you don't want her to know?" she stepped closer and lowered her voice into something that didn't feel like motherhood at all. "If you tell her and it upsets her and something happens, that will be on you." My stomach went cold. She was actually trying to make me afraid of the truth, trying to tie my grandmother's life to my silence like a rope around my throat. My dad didn't correct her. He just stood there and let it happen. That was the moment I realized they weren't worried about hurting Evelyn. They were worried about losing control. If Evelyn knew, she could react, she could change things, she could stop being the quiet bank account they were already mentally dividing up. Brooke shrugged and said, "Grandma won't even remember," like hospice erased consent and medication turned theft into permission. Something inside me closed, like a door finally locking after years of being left open for them to walk through. "I'm going to tell her," I said quietly. My mom tried to start in. "Claire," but I cut through it. "I'm not lying to my grandmother, so you can keep your hands clean." My dad stepped forward, sharp and controlling, telling me I wouldn't create drama while Evelyn was in hospice. "Then you shouldn't have created it," I said, and I walked out before they could turn it into an argument where I ended up apologizing for their actions. In my car, I started shaking. Not just from anger, but from grief, because some stupid part of me still wanted them to feel shame, still wanted Brooke to become a real sister and say she didn't know, still wanted my parents to be the kind of people who could hear themselves and stop. But they weren't those people, and I couldn't keep pretending they might be. Back at my apartment, everything felt smaller and quieter. I stared at a framed photo of Evelyn at one of her last concerts, hands lifted over the keys, face lit with purpose, while my mom's threat replayed on loop. "That will be on you." For an hour it almost worked, because I'd spent my whole life being trained to keep the peace, even if the peace was just me swallowing pain so everyone else could stay comfortable. Then I heard Evelyn's voice in my head from years earlier, the day I lied about failing a math test because I was scared. Truth hurts fast, but lies hurt longer. I realized that if I stayed quiet now, I wouldn't be protecting Evelyn. I'd be protecting the people who stole from her. So at 3 a.m., I set my alarm early, lay there staring into the dark, and made the decision that changed everything. Before school, I was going to hospice. I was going to tell my grandmother exactly what her son and daughter-in-law had done. The next morning, I went to hospice before work. I barely slept. My mother's voice kept replaying in my head. "That will be on you." I hated that it worked for even a few hours. I hated that fear was still something they could use on me. But when I walked into Evelyn's room, the guilt shifted. The air smelled like lavender. The blinds were cracked open. Pale morning light fell across her blanket. She looked smaller than usual, but her eyes were open and alert. She saw me and frowned immediately. "You look like you've been carrying a piano on your back," she said. I tried to smile. I couldn't. I pulled the chair close and took her hand. "Grandma, I have to tell you something." She studied my face for a second. Then she nodded once. "Tell me." So I did. I told her the living room was empty. I told her my dad admitted he sold it. I told her the amount. I told her they bought Brooke a Mercedes. I even told her what my mother said to me, because it still made my throat tighten. I braced myself for tears. I braced myself for a spike in her heart rate. I braced for the kind of pain that would make me regret opening my mouth. But Evelyn didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She didn't even look shocked. She let out a slow breath, like she'd been holding it for years. "I knew," she said quietly. I blinked. "You knew?" She nodded. "I know my son. I know who he became." I felt my chest tighten. "Grandma, I'm so sorry." She squeezed my hand. Her grip was weak, but her voice wasn't. "Don't apologize for telling me the truth. Apologize if you ever lie to protect people who don't deserve it." I asked her what we could do. I asked her if the piano could be recovered. I asked her if we should call the police. She shook her head gently. "Not yet," she said. "First, I need you to understand something." She turned her head toward the bedside table. "Hand me my phone." I gave it to her, still confused. She scrolled through her contacts with steady fingers. Then she hit call and put it on speaker. The line rang 3 times. A man answered with a calm, professional voice. "Evelyn, how are you feeling today?" Evelyn didn't soften her tone. "I'm dying, Harold, but I'm clear-headed, and it's time." There was a pause. Then the man said, "I understand." Evelyn stared at the ceiling as she spoke. "Sunday. Linda's birthday party. At the house. Bring everything." Another pause. "I'll prepare the documents," he replied. "Thank you," she said, and ended the call. I sat there frozen. "Grandma," I whispered, "who is Harold?" Evelyn finally looked at me. There was something almost gentle in her eyes. "Harold Jennings," she said. "My attorney." I stared. "You have an attorney?" She gave me a look like I'd asked if she knew how to breathe. "I've had one for 30 years. Your parents just never bothered to learn anything that didn't benefit them." I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what bring everything meant. I only knew that Sunday had suddenly become a deadline. Before I left, Evelyn made one thing clear. "You will come to the party," she told me. "You will dress nicely. You will keep your mouth shut, even when they try to bait you. And you will watch." I swallowed. "Are you sure you want this at Mom's birthday?" Evelyn's voice stayed calm. "That's exactly why. Your father likes witnesses when he wants applause. He will finally have witnesses when the truth shows up." She paused. "I'm not doing this to be cruel. I'm doing this because I don't have time left to keep pretending, and because you need protection after I'm gone." 2 days later, Harold asked to meet me. I went to his office on my lunch break, still feeling like I was walking into a room I didn't belong in. The building was old. The hallway smelled like paper and furniture polish. His office was neat and quiet, with shelves of law books and framed photos that looked like decades of careful work. Harold Jennings was in his late 60s. He had silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He stood when I walked in and shook my hand. "Claire Weston," he said. "Evelyn speaks very highly of you." I sat across from him, hands folded tightly in my lap. "She told me you'd explain," I said. Harold nodded. "She asked me to, yes. She also asked me to be clear." He opened a folder and slid a document toward me. "Do you know who owns the house your parents live in?" he asked. I answered automatically. "They do. Grandma gave it to them years ago." Harold didn't react. "That's what they told you." He tapped the paper. "It isn't true." I leaned forward. The deed was right there in black and white. The owner's name was not my father's. It was not my mother's. It was Evelyn Harper. My throat went dry. "They've been living there for 10 years, I said. "They've always acted like it was theirs." Harold nodded. "Evelyn allowed them to live there. She never transferred ownership, not legally, not once. My mind started racing. If they didn't own the house, how did they use it as collateral? How did my father talk about property assets like he was some real estate expert? How did my mother host parties and brag about renovations like she was the queen of the neighborhood? Harold watched my expression carefully. Harold Jennings suspected something for a long time, he said. She feared Mark would eventually treat her property like his, so 5 years ago she took steps. He pulled out another packet. Evelyn created a trust, he said, separate from her will, irrevocable. He held my gaze. It was designed to protect her assets if anyone tried to take them while she was vulnerable. I swallowed hard.
Anyone, I repeated. Harold didn't flinch. Yes, including family. Then he said the next line like it was just a fact, not a grenade. You are the beneficiary. I felt lightheaded. Me? I asked. Why me? Harold's voice softened slightly. Because you showed up. Because you loved her without treating her like an account. Because she trusts you to do what's right. He slid one more document across the desk. This outlines what is covered: the house, her financial accounts, and personal property of sentimental value, including the Steinway. My stomach twisted. But the piano is gone, I said. Harold nodded. Which is why Sunday matters. He leaned forward. Your father sold a trust asset without authorization. That creates legal obligations and consequences. I drove back to work in a fog. The word trust echoed in my head. The house wasn't theirs. The piano shouldn't have been theirs to sell, and Evelyn had been planning for this possibility for 5 years. She wasn't reacting. She was executing a plan. That night, I went through the one box of old things Evelyn had given me years ago. I'd always treated it like something too personal to dig through. Now I needed answers. Under faded programs and letters, I found an envelope with my name on it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Inside was a copy of a signed document and a short note. If you're reading this, you needed the truth. The house never left my hands. It was only borrowed. I stared at that line for a long time. Borrowed, like my parents' entire life was a rental they'd forgotten to pay for. Sunday was 3 days away. My mother was planning a birthday party. My father would invite the right people. Brooke would show off her Mercedes. They'd smile and perform and act like nothing was wrong. And somewhere in all of that, Harold Jennings would walk in with everything. I didn't know exactly what would happen, but for the first time in my life, I knew I wasn't powerless. Evelyn had made sure of that. Sunday arrived with crisp winter air and pale sunlight that made everything look too clear. When I pulled up to Evelyn's house, the porch was dressed like a stage. A "Happy 60th, Linda" banner hung across the railing. Cars filled the driveway and lined the street. My parents were hosting like they owned the place, smiling and greeting people as if the house hadn't always been Evelyn's. I sat in my car for a few seconds with my hands on the steering wheel, reminding myself what Evelyn told me. Show up, stay calm, watch. I wore a simple navy dress and the pearl earrings Evelyn gave me years ago. They felt less like jewelry and more like a promise. Then I got out and walked inside. The living room was crowded with at least 30 guests, aunts and uncles, neighbors, my dad's business contacts, and Ethan Caldwell's parents, the people my mom had been desperate to impress since Brooke started dating their son. The Caldwells had that polished, moneyed calm that never looks rushed. Brooke was glued to Ethan's arm, laughing too brightly and checking her mother's reaction every few minutes, like she was waiting for a final stamp of approval. My eyes went straight to the corner where the Steinway should have been. It was still empty. Someone had shoved a tall potted plant there, as if greenery could replace a century of history. That empty space felt loud. It made the whole house feel wrong, like a smile missing a tooth. My mom moved through the room in a red dress, collecting compliments and pretending she wasn't hosting a party in a house she didn't legally own.
My dad worked the crowd, shaking hands and telling stories, performing confidence the way he always did. Then I spotted Harold Jennings near the hallway, quiet and composed, a leather briefcase resting at his feet.
He wasn't socializing, he was waiting. When our eyes met, he gave a small nod. I nodded back and kept my face neutral. A few minutes later, my dad clinked a glass with a spoon. Conversation softened. He stepped into the center of the room like he was taking a stage. "Everyone, if I could have your attention." He lifted his drink. "Today we celebrate 60 wonderful years of my wife, Linda Weston." Applause rose instantly. My mom smiled wide, soaking it in. My dad continued, voice warm and proud. "And I also want to share some exciting family news. As many of you know, our daughter Brooke has been seeing Ethan Caldwell." He gestured toward Ethan and his parents. Ethan smiled politely. His parents nodded, reserved. "To celebrate Brooke's bright future, we have a special surprise." My stomach tightened. I knew exactly what he was about to do. He guided everyone outside like a magician leading an audience to the reveal. The moment we stepped onto the porch, the silver Mercedes in the driveway stole the air from the group. It gleamed like it had been placed there for a commercial. A bright red bow sat on the hood. Brooke squealed and rushed toward it. Phones came out. People crowded for pictures. My dad raised his glass again and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "This was made possible by Evelyn's generosity. She sold her antique piano to invest in her granddaughter's future." The lie came out clean and confident, like he'd rehearsed it. It made my skin crawl. I heard whispers start immediately. "Wasn't that piano supposed to go to Claire?" someone murmured. Another person replied, "Maybe she changed her mind." Brooke posed with the keys like she'd won something. Ethan stood beside her, smiling, but his eyes flicked to his father. Ethan's father didn't smile back. His expression sharpened like he'd just noticed a crack in a wall. Everyone drifted back inside, but the energy didn't follow. The house felt tense, like the air was waiting. My mom tried to steer things back into normal, offering drinks and cake, laughing too loudly. Guests kept glancing at the empty piano corner, then at me, then at my parents. My dad kept smiling, but it looked stiff now, like he could sense something shifting and didn't know how to stop it. Then Harold stood up. He didn't rush. He walked forward with his briefcase in hand and stopped near the empty corner where the Steinway used to be. The placement felt deliberate, like he was pointing at the absence without touching it. He opened the briefcase and pulled out a folder. When he spoke, his voice carried easily through the room. "Good afternoon. My name is Harold Jennings. I'm Evelyn Harper's attorney." The word attorney hit the party like a dropped plate. My dad's smile froze mid-performance. My mom's face tightened. Brooke's brows lifted in confusion that quickly turned to fear. Ethan's parents straightened and focused in a way they hadn't all afternoon. Harold continued, calm and formal. "I apologize for interrupting the celebration, but Evelyn Harper has requested that certain urgent matters regarding her estate be addressed today with witnesses present." He set documents on the dining table, face up. My dad found his voice strained. "My mother has no attorney." Harold didn't blink.
"She has had one for 30 years, Mark." A ripple of whispers moved through the guests. Harold lifted the first document slightly. "There appears to be confusion about ownership of this property. This house has never been transferred to Mark or Linda Weston. It remains legally owned by Evelyn Harper." People leaned in. My dad stared at the paper like it might change. My mom's mouth opened, then closed. Harold turned a page. 5 years ago, Evelyn Harper established an irrevocable trust to protect her assets. This trust includes the home, select financial accounts, and designated personal property. He paused, including the 1891 Steinway piano that was recently sold without authorization. Brooke's face drained of color. My dad's hands curled into fists. My mom's eyes filled with furious tears. Harold's gaze moved across the room and settled on me. "The sole beneficiary of the trust is Claire Weston." For a second, no one breathed. Then Brooke whispered, "That's not real." My dad snapped, "This is a setup." My mom hissed, "She's not in her right mind." Ethan shifted a step away from Brooke. His father's expression turned cold and distant, like my family had just become a liability. Harold didn't argue. He simply stated the consequence. "The sale of the piano constitutes unauthorized disposal of trust property. The $95,000 must be returned to the trust."
He nodded toward the window, where the Mercedes was still visible. If necessary, that vehicle can be liquidated. My mother's birthday party didn't explode. It did something worse. It collapsed, quietly, in front of the exact people my parents cared about most. 6 days after that party, hospice called me at 6:12 a.m. The nurse's voice was gentle and practiced. "You should come now. She's asking for you." I drove on autopilot, hands shaking on the steering wheel, replaying Evelyn's calm face in my mind, the way she said she didn't have time left to pretend. When I walked into her room, the lavender was still there, but lighter, like the scent was fading with her. She looked paper-thin. Her eyes opened when she heard me. She smiled, small and tired. "My Claire," she whispered. I sat beside her and took her hand. It felt fragile but warm. "Harold told me what happened," she said. "You held yourself well." My throat tightened. "I didn't want it to be like that," I admitted. "I just couldn't let them lie to you." She squeezed my fingers weakly. "You didn't do this. They did. You only stopped carrying their secret." I tried to speak and failed. Tears came anyway. Evelyn watched me for a long moment and then said the words that broke me in a different way. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you sooner." I shook my head hard. "You did," I said. "You gave me music. You gave me a place to breathe." She blinked slowly, like each movement cost something. "I watched them turn you into the responsible one," she whispered. "I kept hoping they'd change. That was my mistake." I held her hand tighter. "I changed it," I said. "You made sure they couldn't take everything." She smiled again, a flicker of pride. "Live well," she breathed. "That's how you honor me." She closed her eyes, and I stayed there until evening, until her breathing slowed and then stopped, peaceful and quiet, with my hand in hers. The funeral was simple, exactly what she wanted. No lavish flowers, no performance, just music and the people who actually showed up for her when it mattered. I played a nocturne on the church's old upright piano, not the Steinway that was gone, but something steady enough to carry the room. My parents sat in the back.
My dad worked the crowd, shaking hands and telling stories, performing confidence the way he always did. Then I spotted Harold Jennings near the hallway, quiet and composed, a leather briefcase resting at his feet. He wasn't socializing. He was waiting. When our eyes met, he gave a small nod. I nodded back and kept my face neutral. A few minutes later, my dad clinked a glass with a spoon. Conversation softened. He stepped into the center of the room like he was taking a stage. "Everyone, if I could have your attention." He lifted his drink. "Today we celebrate 60 wonderful years of my wife, Linda Weston." Applause rose instantly. My mom smiled wide, soaking it in. My dad continued, voice warm and proud. "And I also want to share some exciting family news. As many of you know, our daughter Brooke has been seeing Ethan Caldwell." He gestured toward Ethan and his parents. Ethan smiled politely. His parents nodded, reserved. "To celebrate Brooke's bright future, we have a special surprise." My stomach tightened. I knew exactly what he was about to do. He guided everyone outside like a magician leading an audience to the reveal. The moment we stepped onto the porch, the silver Mercedes in the driveway stole the air from the group. It gleamed like it had been placed there for a commercial. A bright red bow sat on the hood. Brooke squealed and rushed toward it. Phones came out. People crowded for pictures. My dad raised his glass again and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "This was made possible by Evelyn's generosity. She sold her antique piano to invest in her granddaughter's future." The lie came out clean and confident, like he'd rehearsed it. It made my skin crawl. I heard whispers start immediately. "Wasn't that piano supposed to go to Claire?" someone murmured. Another person replied, "Maybe she changed her mind." Brooke posed with the keys like she'd won something. Ethan stood beside her, smiling, but his eyes flicked to his father. Ethan's father didn't smile back. His expression sharpened, like he'd just noticed a crack in a wall. They didn't come near me. My mom wore dark sunglasses inside. My dad stared forward like he was afraid to turn his head. Brooke didn't come at all. Someone told me she was too overwhelmed, which felt like the cleanest excuse she could find. I didn't announce the family drama. I didn't need to. Everyone already knew enough.
Over the next month, Harold handled the legal work. My parents returned the money, not in one clean payment but in pieces. The Mercedes went back, and Brooke took a loss she'd never expected to face. Ethan's family quietly disappeared from their lives. My dad lost a partnership he'd been counting on, because once people realized he'd represented a house he didn't own as part of his image, trust evaporated. The consequences weren't loud, they were practical, they were permanent. I moved into Evelyn's house 3 months later. It felt strange at first, walking through rooms that still held her presence, but slowly it started to feel like a home instead of a battlefield. I bought a new piano with part of the returned money, not the original Steinway, that was gone, but a beautiful grand that filled the corner again, not as a replacement, but as a promise that what mattered couldn't be erased so easily. I kept teaching, I kept showing up for my students, and for the first time in my life, I stopped shrinking myself to keep other people comfortable. I don't hate my parents. I don't even spend much time thinking about them. That's a real boundary. I gave them time to leave the house. They left early anyway. Some places become too heavy when they remind you of what you almost got away with. As for Brooke, she called once, months later, and said therapy had been humbling. I told her I hoped she meant it. Trust takes time. She didn't argue. Evelyn didn't leave me a perfect family. She left me something better. She left me the truth and the backbone to stand inside it. If this story hit you in any way, take a second to support the channel. Hit like if you made it to the end. Subscribe for more real story-driven content like this, and comment where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read the comments and I appreciate every one.